Having previously made videos regarding Jewish history among the Georgian Jews, Caucasus Mountain Jews, Bukharian Jews, and Persian Jews in my role as an adjunct professor of history at Touro University and its Touro colleges, I would like to share my next video of another non-Ashkenazi, non-Sephardi Eastern Jewish community, the Jews of India. Their story is a very long one, going back hundreds and perhaps even thousands of years, comprising of four unique communities, each with its own moment of arrival in India, its own development as a community, and sense of identity. In contrast to Christian and Muslim societies, which had a history of anti-Semitism and limited tolerance, the largely Hindu societies of India had no tradition of anti-Semitism and welcomed Jewish settlers. Over the centuries, these separate communities developed based on places of origin. The first Jewish community settled in the southern port of Cochin, reputedly living in the country since biblical times. The Christian apostle Thomas was reputed to have visited Cochin, as it had a Jewish community at the time. His missionary work created an indigenous Christian community in India that predates European colonization by more than 1,400 years. Later, there were Jewish settlers that included refugees of the Inquisition, who settled in the Portuguese colony of Goa. They were known as the White Jews for their European ancestry, known to the Indians as the Saturday oil pressers for their profession and religious observance. The most recent settlers were Baghdadi Jews, merchant families from Arab lands, Persia, and Afghanistan. They were the wealthiest among the Jews of India. History books write about a Jewish presence in southern India at the time of the Romans. This region is known as the Malabar Coast, rich for its spice trade. The town of Cranganore near Cochin had their own Jewish exilarchs from 379 to 1344. That's 72 recorded generations. The local Rajas called these leaders Mudaliars, and the Jews called this town Shingli. The prestige of the Mudaliar of Shingli inspired legends of a Jewish kingdom in this corner of southern India. In the 1300s, Spanish rabbi Nisim ben Reuben wrote a short poem about a Jewish king in Shingli. The pictures you see here is an illustration of the landing of the first Jews in India during the time of the Hasmoneans, a small group of shipwreck survivors that became the Bnei Israel community. Picture here shows a bar mitzvah boy holding a Sephardi Torah scroll in a synagogue. This is an example of Baghdadi synagogue, the Knesset Eliyahu synagogue in Mumbai, which is in the largest state of India with the largest Jewish population, the state of Maharashtra. But there's also smaller communities you can see on this map, very tiny in the world's most populated country, and includes a few famous individuals who we'll touch on later. So going back to Cochin, the oldest of the communities here, the silting of the harbor in Shingli in 1340s led to its decline. In 1523, it was conquered by the Portuguese, and Jewish life ended in Shingli, also known as Cranganore. As they had done in their homeland and in the colony of Brazil, the Portuguese extended the Inquisition to its Indian colonies, destroying the two synagogues in Cranganore and expelling its Jews. In the nearby city of Cochin, the local Maharaja welcomed the Jews, who established a neighborhood called Jewtown. Soil from Cranganore was placed with the dead Jews of Cochin, and the destruction of that centuries-old community was mourned by Jews in Cochin for many generations afterwards. With the arrival of Portuguese, there were also crypto-Jews, the hidden Jews, who had survived the Inquisition, and they were known as the Paradeshi, or foreign Jews. Relations between the Paradeshi Jews and the brown Jews were poor, because the newcomers doubted the Jewish status of this older community. It was around 1520 that the Radbaz, an Egyptian-based posek, ruled that Cochin Jews and their slaves are Jewish. This ruling was affirmed more than around a century later in 1610 by Rabbi Yaakov de Castro, a successor to the Radbaz. These older Cochin Jews had connections to the Yemenite Jewish community, while the newcomer Paradeshi Jews looked to the Jewish communities in the Middle East for religious guidance. The map here shows Portuguese settlements in India, beginning in the 1502 in Cochin, and the last one being 1961 in Goa, the last Portuguese colony in India that was re-annexed by India in 1961. Other places also included Sri Lanka, the Lakadiv and Maldive Islands, and a few other places. This is the Paradeshi synagogue, in Cochin, built in 1568 by descendants of the Inquisition survivors, known for its iconic clock tower. And the design inside looks also very European in the Jewtown neighborhood. From 1568 to 1987, the Paradeshi synagogue maintained a minyan, or the quorum of at least 10 men for prayer. Portuguese presence in Cochin ended in 1663, when their settlement was captured by the Dutch. The Sephardi crypto-Jews who arrived the Portuguese and the local Cochin Jews welcomed the Dutch invaders, assisting them in expelling the Portuguese. During the battle for Cochin, the Portuguese set fire to Jewish homes in Matancheri, a Jewish community, and burned the Paradeshi synagogue in Cochin. So no wonder the Jews there welcomed the Dutch, who were known for their tolerance. Among other Dutch colonies at the time included New Amsterdam, what became New York, a haven for Jews in the New World. And here you can see examples of Dutch architecture in a street in Cochin called Burger Street, Burger meaning townsman. Sri Lanka also, of course, at the time also had a sizable Dutch community. It was during this period that contact was established with Jews in the Netherlands. In 1686, Moshe Pereira de Paiva, a Sephardic Jew from Amsterdam, visited the Jews of Cochin, supplying them with Jewish literature. Like other Dutch colonies, Cochin attracted Sephardi merchants, who became known as the members of the Paradeshi community, or white Jews. Because of cultural differences, the Paradeshi Jews and the Cochin Jews lived in separate neighborhoods, and marriages between them were rare. Within the city, there were also slaves owned by Jews. Although these slaves had converted to Judaism, they were treated as a lower caste within the community. And there was a very important historic individual, Abraham Barak Salem, who had lived from 1882 to 1967. He was known as the Jewish Gandhi, an attorney by trade who fought for their legal recognition as Jews by law and within the community. In 1950, his son Balfour was the first in the Cochin community to break the color barrier by marrying a white Jew of Portuguese Sephardi background. As his name suggests, Balfour means that this community later became Zionist, and nearly all of his descendants now live in Israel. In 1949, most of Cochin's Jews had made Aliyah. That year, the last Maharaja of Cochin, H.H. Ramavarna, delivered a long speech to departing Jews, describing the friendship between the royal family and the Jews, toleration, hospitality, and support for the newborn Jewish state. When Israel declared independence, Jews in Cochin responded with enthusiasm, viewing the new state as an answer to centuries-old prayers. Their rush to make Aliyah was different from other communities, where Jews often migrated as a result of persecution. Coming from a society based on social castes, Jews were tolerated because they did not intermarry and worked in specialized professions. They were regarded as simply another caste in a society of numerous castes. Presently, fewer than 40 Jewish individuals reside in Cochin. Other communities from this community includes Mumbai and Kolkata. Now, a little bit on the upcoming history. Early 19th century, around 1816, the British took over India from the Dutch. And on this map, you can see a collection of semi-independent princely states ruled by local monarchs and lands administered directly by the British India Company. Here's a couple of books about the Jews of Cochin, a picture of Abraham Barak Salem, known as the Jewish Gandhi, a street called Jewtown Road. What might sound insulting in English was perfectly normal in the local Malayalam language. And the Jews there even had their own version of Yiddish or Sephardi or Ladino that was called Judeo-Malayalam, a combination of the local language and Hebrew. This is another synagogue in Cochin. This is a picture of the Cochin Jews making Aliyah to Israel, first learning Hebrew in India. And you can see here a picture of Theodor Herzl, the founder of political Zionism, a picture of the Jews entering Israel, and a picture of the Ma'abarot, the transit camps, mostly in the Negev desert, where the Sephardi and Mizrahi Jews were settled, in contrast to the Ashkenazim, who were largely settled in existing cities. Picture here shows another picture of the arrival of Bnei Israel in India from a book by H.S. Kehimkar, and a picture of a Bnei Israel cemetery in India with signs written in Hindi and in English. There's illustrations showing the Bnei Israel community and their customs, including the Malida feast, a feast remembering the prophet Eliyahu or Elijah that is an element of that community's tradition. Another sign for Jewtown, popular among tourists today in India. The story of this community began as a shipwreck near Mumbai many centuries ago, 14 survivors who kept Shabbat, Kashrut, and Brit Milah. For hundreds of years, their descendants had no contact with other Jews. Only in 1768, Rahabi Daniel, a merchant from Cochin, met with this community to determine if they were Jews. He was impressed to see that they were strict in their kashrut, but did not observe Hanukkah, as they had departed from Israel before the holiday's miracle occurred. With the arrival of British rule, this community migrated to Mumbai, the large city, where their first synagogue, Shar Rachamim, was completed in 1796. The urbanized Bnei Israel community then had spread to Pune, Ahmedabad, Karachi, and Delhi. Towards the end of British rule in the early 20th century, the Bnei Israel established connections with the progressive and Orthodox communities in England. In 1897, the community was invited to participate in the first Zionist Congress and declined to do so on the grounds that the resurrection of Israel was a divine decision. That puts them on the same page as the Satmar Hasidim. But in 1920, when the first Zionist organization was established in India, the Bnei Israel community passed a resolution expressing full sympathy with the Zionist cause. An example of local political success was in 1920, when Dr. Elijah Moses, who lived from 1887 to 1957, a member of the Bnei Israel community, was elected as councillor in the Bombay Municipal Corporation. In 1937, briefly served as the mayor of Mumbai. A street in Mumbai carries his name, as you can see here, written in Marathi, the local language, and in English. India's poet laureate, Nissim Ezekiel, is the member of this community and wrote his poetry in English and in Marathi. Its women are represented in the country's film industry, including actress Esther Victoria Abraham, who was the first Miss India in 1947. In the military, they are represented by Vice Admiral Benjamin Abraham Sampson, Major General Jonathan Reuben Sampson, Provost Marshal Michael Samuel, and others. Most Bnei Israel members had made Aliyah after the State of Israel was founded. Among Israeli rabbis, there were doubts on their Jewish identity, which led to protests and a ruling in the early 1960s by the chief rabbinate that the Bnei Israel are Jews for the purposes of marriage and other purposes. Genetic evidence found that the Bnei Israel have Middle Eastern ancestry and arrived in India within the past 1,000 years. Besides the Feast of Malida, the community also has a month-long day fast, meaning sunrise to sundown, during the month of Elul, prior to the holiday of Rosh Hashanah, a concept adapted from the Muslim custom of Ramadan, which is also a month-long fast. These are maps of some of the Jewish communities of the Bnei Israel and Cochin Jews. You could see Cochin in Kerala, the southern state, Mumbai and New Delhi. Here's another book about this community. Notice the author, Edna Fernandez. Yes, a lot of people in India have Portuguese last names coming from that earlier colonial period. This is a map showing the major Jewish communities in modern India. You can see the different cultures of the Paradeshi or Sephardi Jews, the Baghdadi Jews, Jews from the Middle East who arrived in the 19th century, Bnei Israel Jews, the first Jews of India, and all the way here on the edge, not colored, but in the states of Mizoram and Manipur, the not colored here are the Bnei Menashe Jews, who we'll talk about later. This is a picture of a Baghdadi synagogue in Mumbai and a book called Jews in British India, Identity in the Colonial Era. The Baghdadi community are descendants of merchants who began trading with the Mughal dynasty in India beginning in the early 17th century. The term refers not only to Jews from Iraq, but also Yemen, Syria, and other Arabic-speaking lands. In 1730, the first settlement of Baghdadi Jews was in Surat, in the state of Gujarat, where they ran a trade network to Basra in Iraq. The arrival of British rule provided expanded opportunities for Baghdadi Jewish merchants, who then built their trading posts in other Indian cities and further east in Singapore, Hong Kong, and Shanghai. Religious persecution by the Ottoman Turks in Iraq and Syria resulted in more Jews from those lands coming to India and the shift of business centers from Surat to Mumbai and Kolkata. The wealthiest families among India's Baghdadi Jews were the Sassoons and Kaduris, who have descendants around the world. David Sassoon, who lived from 1792 to 1864, was a scion of this family and held the position as chief treasurer to the governor of Baghdad. In his new home, he built the Magen David synagogue in Mumbai and the Knesset Eliyahu synagogue in 1884, which includes a mikvah, Talmud Torah, and hostel. Second largest Baghdadi community was in Kolkata. The first Jew to settle there was Shalom HaKohen in 1798, a Syrian jeweler to the local Muslim prince. In both cities, the Baghdadi Jewish community had good relations with British colonial authorities, and gradually their language switched from Arabic to English. and their religious guidance switched from the rabbis of Baghdad to those in London. At its height during World War II, this city's Jewish community numbered at 5,000. And here's a couple of books about these communities in the city of Mumbai, sort of like the New York of India as far as its population, diversity, and history. After India achieved independence, the wealthiest members of this community immigrated to Great Britain, United States, and Australia. A smaller number that was less affluent made Aliyah to Israel. Synagogues, cemeteries, the Jewish girls' school of Kolkata are maintained by Muslim caretakers. In this majority Hindu society, Muslims look positively on Jews as a fellow monotheistic minority. This is a synagogue in Kolkata. Looks a lot like a European church, but it's a synagogue built during the British period. Nahum & Sons, a popular dessert bakery founded by Jews, still in business in Kolkata, and this is the Jewish girls' schools, but there's no Jewish girls there, but for the Star of David on its doorway. Among the most famous individuals of the Baghdadi community was J.F.R. Jacob, also known as Jack Jacob, a general in the army of India who fought in India's War of Independence in 1947-48 and in the India-Pakistan War of 1971, in which Bangladesh gained its independence. And he wrote a book about it, Surrender at Dhaka, Birth of a Nation. Now, about the isolated groups and lost tribes. Alongside the brown Jews of Cochin and the white Baghdadi Jews and Paradeshi Jews, India's first known Jews I mentioned were survivors of that shipwreck, the Bnei Israel. And then, I'm just continue on my notes. In the northeastern periphery of India, a tribe claiming descent from Menashe had emerged in the 19th century, claiming Jewish ancestry based on the similarity of their oral history and customs to mainstream Judaism. Their religious customs include circumcision on the 8th day, levirate marriage, prayer shawls, and a festival remembering an Exodus. They claim Manmasi as their common ancestor, which sounds like Menashe. Their awareness of mainstream Judaism emerged during the British rule of India, when Christian missionaries attempted to convert them. And in the process, the Bnei Menashe studied the Bible and chose Judaism, finding a familiar message in it. In the 1970s, Israeli Rabbi Eliyahu Avichai visited the Bnei Menashe and lobbied the Israeli government to recognize them as Jews. The effort took 30 years to succeed. This is a picture of Bnei Menashe Jews receiving their Israeli citizenship, a synagogue in the city of Aizawl, the capital of the state of Mizoram, a book by Israeli journalist Hillel Halkin called Across the Sabbath River, and a picture of Michael Freund, an Israeli activist of the Shavei Israel organization that teaches Hebrew and Judaism to this tribe and prepares them to make Aliyah. Critics charged that, based on genetic testing, the Bnei Menashe could not be related to other Jewish communities. Politically, this group is also controversial. They're praised for their patriotism, but also criticized by the political left for settling in the Israeli territories, such as Kiryat Arba, next to Hebron. There's a picture of Bnei Menashe soldiers in the Israeli army, a synagogue in India, and another one in India, the city of Aizawl, where there's recently been ethnic violence between the different small groups of northeastern India that highlights the importance of security and safety and the case for Aliyah. This is an Indian Jewish synagogue in Israel, which we'll touch on in a bit. India and Israel both share many political ties on account of their history, political conditions, and economies. Both countries became independent within a year of each other, were led by socialist parties in their early years, and faced a common enemy, Pakistan. India is a popular destination for Israeli tourists and a recipient of Israeli military and civilian technology. In Israel, the farming community of Nevatim in the Negev desert has a sizable community of Jews from Cochin. The Kerala synagogue in Nevatim was built in the style of the synagogues of the Cochin Jews who settled there in the 1950s. Over time, descendants of Olim from Cochin married Jews of other backgrounds, blending into the larger Israeli population. In recent years, Nevatim has welcomed Bnei Menashe refugees. Although they have little in common with the Cochin, Bnei Israel, and Baghdadi Jews, the Bnei Menashe were represented at the opening of the Heritage and Cultural Center of Indian Jews in 2023 in Nevatim. This is a picture of Bnei Menashe Jews in Nevatim, picture from the 1950s, from the early years of this community, food served at the Malida feast, and a aerial map of the community in the Negev desert. We'll talk a little bit later about the community in Myanmar and other neighboring countries. But before that, a little bit about the Chabad. In November 26, 2008, just get to the slide there. Terrorists from Pakistan invaded the Chabad of Mumbai, murdered its rabbi, Gavriel Holzberg, and his pregnant wife, Rivka, and 4 other hostages. In total, 150 people were killed as attackers targeted multiple locations in the city. The attack was mourned by Israeli and Indian leaders, resulting in closer cooperation against Islamist terrorists, as well as the rebuilding and expansion of this Chabad house. No, not yet. Okay. Among the neighbors of India, countries that are next to it, a little bit of history that's a bit shorter. Baghdadi Jewish merchants also settled in Yangon, the capital of neighboring Myanmar, where the Musmeach Yeshua synagogue stands as a memorial to this once sizable community. Most of Myanmar's Jews fled on the eve of World War II, and after the nationalization of businesses in 1962. Among the most famous Jews born in Burma, as it was historically known, economist Ezra Solomon, who later moved to the United States. In the former capital of Yangon, Jewish-built landmarks include the Lokanat, formerly known as the Sofer building, named for Isaac Sofer, a businessman. His family made its fortune importing wines and spirits, exporting rice and supplying oilmen. In the 1930s, David Sofer served as Yangon's mayor. Abraham Sofer eventually made his way from Burma to England and then Hollywood, building a career as a stage and screen actor. Recognizing the presence of Jewish tourists, workers, and residents, Chabad established its presence in Myanmar in 2019. But the Chabad house is a couple of miles away from the Musmeach Yeshua synagogue, because Chabad usually builds where there are already Jewish residents, Jewish businesses, or tourists to better serve that community. Continuing on to Pakistan. The Pakistani cities of Karachi and Rawalpindi also had Jewish communities comprising of Bnei Yisrael, Baghdadi Jews, and Bukharian Jewish refugees who fled from communism in the 1920s and 30s. The Magen Shalom synagogue was built by Solomon David Omederkar in 1893. He worked as a surveyor in the city of Karachi and was buried there. Another activist, Abraham Rubin, served as a city councilman in the 1930s. At its height, the Jewish population in Pakistan did not exceed 2,500. After Pakistan became independent in 1947, the country's anti-Israel policies and widespread anti-Semitism resulted in a mass exodus of Jews from the country. Ironically, one of the founders of Pakistan was an Ashkenazi convert to Islam, Muhammad Asad, who was born Leopold Weiss. He served as a diplomat in the country's early years. The pictures you see here shows the Bnei Yisrael community of Karachi, the Magen Shalom synagogue, which was demolished in the 1980s to make way for a shopping center. There's a picture of Jewish cemeteries in Karachi and a picture of a former synagogue in Rawalpindi built in the Art Deco style of the 1930s. Picture here is Faisal Ben Khald, also known as Fishel Ben Khald, who we'll talk about in a moment. Picture of the Magen Shalom synagogue in Karachi, which is no longer there, and a picture of the Magen Shalom synagogue in Holon, Israel, in Ramla, Israel. The synagogue in Ramla has the same name as the synagogue in Karachi, but built in the concrete style of 1950s Israel. Picture of the former synagogue in Rawalpindi, a picture of a memorial to Jewish soldiers in the British Army of World War I. 200 Jews from Rawalpindi were sent to fight in the British Army in World War I. 7 had died in battle. There's a book also about the city of Lahore by Hazel Seltzer Kahan, talks about growing up Jewish in Pakistan before the massive anti-Semitism following independence. Another book is called Muslim Zion by Faisal Devji, recognizing what Pakistani leader Zia-ul-Haq said in the 1980s, that Pakistan was like a Muslim version of Israel, a state built on a religious identity. And yet Pakistan never did make common cause with Israel, instead supporting its enemies for many of the years. And you can see even today, very large feelings of anti-Israel among the Pakistani population. Continuing on, there's a picture, by the way, of the former market on a street that used to be called Solomon David Street in Karachi. Markets built by Jews. We talked about the Magen Shalom synagogue in Ramla and the synagogue building in Karachi demolished to make way for a shopping center. This is Solomon David Street, an area called the Jubilee Market. Regarding Fishel Ben Khald, he is the son of a Jewish mother and a Muslim father. He fought in the Pakistani courts to have his Jewish identity officially recognized and for the ability to travel to Israel as a Pakistani citizen. It was granted in 2014, overcoming opposition from his brothers. Ben Khald had been campaigning to preserve the Jewish cemetery in Karachi and recognize Jewish contributions to the country's history. Bangladesh never had a Jewish community and has been hostile towards Israel since its founding in 1971 on account of its Jewish Muslim identity. Nepal is popular among Israeli tourists and has a Chabad house in its capital of Kathmandu. Bhutan has diplomatic relations with Israel, an honor as Bhutan has few embassies and consulates in the world. Neighboring Sri Lanka, no Jewish history there other than the tea plantations, some of which were owned by Jewish individuals during the British period. And no Jewish history in Maldives, a Muslim country with a similar history to Bangladesh. This is a picture of a synagogue in Mumbai. Here's one in New Delhi, built in the modernist style. Here's one in Kolkata, and here's another one in Kolkata. A picture of the Chabad, the couple that was killed in 2008 by terrorists. A picture of the former Nariman house, that's today Chabad house, for meals and classes and prayer and hosting. Picture of the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi with the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the son of the Holzbergs with his Indian caretaker meeting in Israel. These are other Chabad houses throughout India, including the largest outdoor Seder in Kathmandu, Nepal, serving the Israeli backpackers. Chabad communities each operate independently of each other while sharing common ideology, but not entirely. Some Chabad houses are messianic, believing that their late Rebbe is the Messiah, which most Chabad houses do not believe. But all Chabad houses are known for having their Hanukkah menorah parades on motorcades, in this case using Indian cars, across the city of New Delhi, as you could tell by the skyline. I want to thank you all very much for watching this video. Please share the history, attend some of my lectures, and I hope to share more such videos in the near future. Thank you very much.